Vulkan, Primarch of the Salamanders, stood as the largest and most physically powerful among all his brothers. Clad in standard power armor, the Lord of Drakes was already as bulky and imposing as Horus in full Terminator armor, yet he was also the kindest and most compassionate of the Emperor's sons. When the Emperor found him on Nocturne, Vulkan refused to lead the Astartes Legion that bore his genocide into the Great Crusade. The Primarch dreamed only of being a craftsman. Forging exquisite works of metal, war, and slaughter repulsed him. For years, he remained by the Emperor's side, learning from his father rather than reuniting with his legion. It was the Master of Mankind who finally convinced Vulkan of the Crusade's necessity, tasking him with leading the Exeate Legion with mercy, a living example of humanity's worth to his more extreme brothers. Under Vulkan's command, the Salamanders became the Astartes chapter most dedicated to minimizing civilian casualties during the Great Crusade. They prioritized protecting innocent lives above all else, even if it meant sacrificing tactical advantage. His brothers recognized him as the son most aligned with the Emperor's vision of a peaceful humanity. But like other Primarchs, Vulkan vanished into the mists of time after the horusheresy and the subsequent purges. For over 1,000 years, his legend faded into myth until the Greenskins rose again. The roar of Warboss, the beast, shook the Imperium to its core. On Terra Curland, last surviving captain of the Imperial Fist and defender of the Imperial Palace, returned at the head of the Final Wall Fleet, a coalition of the Sons of Dorn. The Astartes seized command of the Imperium from the ineffectual High Lords, rallying forces for an expedition to Ulanor, the birthplace of the Ork, Waagh. Just as the Emperor's scattered armies reassembled beneath the throne world with founding chapters like the Blood Angels, Dark Angels, Space Wolves, and Ultramarines answering the call, Inquisitor Veritas dropped a bombshell. Vulkan, the fabled Lord of Drakes, had reappeared on Cadillac, a death world. No one knew why the Primarch was there, or what horrors he had endured over the millennia, but his return would be a beacon of hope for the beleaguered Imperium. When Curlin led a task force to Cadillac, they found Vulkan exactly as Veritas had described, alone, locked in combat with an entire orc horde that had invaded the planet. The Primarch fought to draw the greenskin tide away from Cadillac's Imperial civilians and mortal troops, his massive frame cutting through orc boys like a scythe. Above him, an unfinished orc battle moon hovered in orbit, its construction fueled by resources siphoned from the planet's surface via advanced gravity harvesters. The Greenskins were stripping Cadillac bare, funneling ore, organic matter, and even raw energy into the moon's forge bays to complete their weapon. When Vulkan established contact with the Imperial reinforcements, his voice was steady but resolute. During the Great Crusade, I swore never to let another world burn, he rumbled over the Vox. I will not leave Cadillac until every orc here is dead. Curlin did not hesitate. His Astartes joined the Primarch's fight, their bolters roaring in unison with Vulkan's hammer. With fresh troops at his side, Vulkan launched a blistering assault on the orc surface facilities, tearing through gravity harvesters and supply depots. He then led a boarding party to the unfinished battle moon, where he destroyed its core reactor in a cataclysmic explosion. As the fireball consumed the moon, Vulkan's immortal body regenerated amid the debris, his perpetual genes allowing him to rise from the ashes unbroken. To the Imperial forces watching in awe, he was a living legend, a Primarch of the old days, walking among them. With Cadillac freed, Vulkan finally agreed to Curlin's request to return to Terra and oversee the Ulanor expedition. What he found on the throne world shocked even the gentle Primarch. The High Lords' conclave was a den of incompetence and corruption, its members bickering while the Imperium burned. Many begged Vulkan to purge the rotten politicians and seize power, establishing a more efficient regime. But Vulkan refused. Angered though he was, he understood the limits of mortal flesh. The Emperor's vision had never distinguished between mortals and superhumans. That division had been forged by the arrogance of some Astartes, who forgot their oaths to serve humanity and deemed themselves superior. Such hubris had sparked the horusheresy. Vulkan would not repeat that mistake. He was no would-be emperor, nor would he meddle in mortal governance. The past should not change the present, Vulkan told Curlin privately. His time had passed. The future belonged to the next generation of Imperials. Still, he addressed the High Lords, his towering frame casting a shadow over the conclave. He dyed their cowardice and greed, his voice shaking the halls of the Imperial Palace. But for the sake of unity, he stopped short of reform. Prepare for war, he commanded. I will lead the expedition to Ulanor. You will ensure Terra stands strong in my absence. The Imperial coalition bound for Ulanor was a force to behold. Alongside the Final Wall Fleet and founding chapters, it included dozens of Astra Militarum regiments, legions of Adeptus Mechanicus Scutari, and even a handful of Titan legions. Though Vulkan was the nominal commander, he delegated most military decisions to Curlin, trusting the Astartes' experience in waging the Beast Wars. When the fleet emerged from the warp above Ulanor, the Primarch led the charge, his Terminator-clad form leaping from a drop pod to the planet's surface. Ulanor was a fortress. A thick energy shield enveloped the entire world, while orbital and ground-based anti-aircraft batteries filled the sky with flak. The defenses were so formidable that the Imperial fleet could not launch effective orbital bombardments. Worse, when the Astartes librarians tried to probe the Orc battle plans with their psychic powers, they were struck down by a wave of raw, Jage! Energy-driven matter killed instantly. But the sacrifice revealed the enemy's heart. The WAAGH emanated from a massive, grotesque Orc palace built on the very spot where Horus Lupercal had been crowned War Master during the Great Crusade over a millennium earlier. The invasion began. Adeptus Mechanicus ships were torn apart by Orc electromagnetic weapons as they moved into position, but hundreds of drop pods and landing craft slipped through the defenses. Astartes, Astra Militarum, and Skitarii poured onto Ulinor's surface, advancing under Vulkan's banner. At first, the Orc resistance was scattered, too scattered. Then the planet itself began to shift. Ulinor was no mere world, it was a battle planet, a colossal war machine far larger and more powerful than any battle moon. The Greenskins had used their smaller battle moons as test beds, perfecting the technology to reshape an entire planet into a weapon of annihilation. Once complete, the battle planet would use the scattered battle moons as warp beacons, cutting a path to Terra and destroying the throne world. As the planet's crust split open, spires of iron and plasma erupted from the ground, and vast trenches filled with Orc boys and war machines appeared. The Greenskin assault became coordinated, relentless, driving the Imperial forces into pre-laid kill zones. Casualties mounted. The Astra Militarum suffered 50% losses within hours. The Astartes lost a third of their number. Even the Titan legions were pressed back by Orc Gargants and super heavy war machines. To turn the tide, the Officio Assassinorum sent operatives to infiltrate the Orc palace, and what they saw chilled them to the bone. Stretching as far as the eye could see were Orc war factories, churning out weapons and vehicles. Standing guard were tens of thousands of giant Orcs, each as large and powerful as a war boss, clad in ornate power armor and wielding weapons that could punch through Astartes' power armor. The palace was a trap. The Imperial forces would never reach the beast through direct assault. Kurland shifted strategy. Instead of attacking the palace, the Imperials targeted Orc supply depots and food stocks. Orcs could survive on photosynthesis, but the brutal pace of war left them ravenous. With their supplies burned and stolen, the Greenskins grew desperate. They began feasting on grots, squigs, human prisoners, even weaker Orcs. The infighting weakened their lines, forcing the elite Orcs guarding the palace to deploy to the front lines. The Imperial advance resumed. When they reached the palace, they discovered its true nature. It was the battle planet's core, a massive engine infused with raw WAAGH energy, capable of unleashing cataclysmic blasts that vaporized entire companies of Astartes. It was then that Vulkan stepped forward. Leading the last 3,000 Astartes, he launched a desperate assault on the palace. His hammer, forged breaker, smashed through the outer armor of the war machine, carving a path for his sons. Inside, the Primarch cut down Orcs by the dozens, his perpetual body healing even as Orc blades and bolters struck him. At the heart of the palace, in the power core chamber, they found the beast. The war boss stood over 10 meters tall, larger than a Warhound-class Titan, his body encased in thick, jagged power armor that made him look like a statue of black iron and blood. Never since the Great Crusade had an Orc of such terrifying size and strength been seen. The moment combat was joined, chapter masters, Sidra Crimson Fists, and Odana's Ultramarines were crushed by the beast's massive power claws. Captain Valafar of the Blood Angels was sent flying across the chamber, his armor shattered. The Imperial's bolters, melta-guns, and plasma weapons bounced off the beast's armor, useless against his sheer resilience. He was a nightmare made flesh, far beyond the Astartes' ability to defeat. Only a Primarch could stand against him. Vulkan lunged at the Orc, his hammer swinging. The two giants clashed, the force of their impact shaking the palace to its foundations. Vulkan's perpetual body allowed him to endure blows that would have killed any other being, but the beast was relentless. The Orc's power claw sliced through Vulkan's Terminator armor, drawing black blood from the Primarch's chest. It was a battle of unstoppable forces. Neither could gain the upper hand, and the Astartes looked on, helpless. They were ants beside these titans. Outside, the Imperial lines were collapsing. The Astra Militarum and Adeptus Mechanicus fought valiantly, but the battle planet's engines were powering up, preparing to unleash a blast that would wipe out the remaining Imperial forces. Vulkan knew what he had to do. Hope did not lie in the past, it lay in the future. He would give his life so that the Imperium might survive. "Retreat," Vulkan roared over the Vox to Kurland. "Take your men and flee. I will end this." The Astartes hesitated, tears mixing with the blood on their faces, but they obeyed their Primarch. As they evacuated the palace, Vulkan turned to the beast, his eyes burning with resolve. He cast aside all mercy for the Orc, mercy for himself, and grabbed the war boss in a vice-like grip. Together, they plummeted into the churning core of WAAGH energy below. The raw, unbridled power of the orc collective will surged around Vulkan. He saw visions of the orcs' primal origin, two massive green shadows, laughing maniacally, their essence woven into the very fabric of the galaxy. For any other being, the energy would have disintegrated them instantly. But Vulkan's perpetual body held on, if only for a moment. With a final roar, for the Emperor, for humanity, for the sons he loved, he channeled all his strength into Forgebreaker and brought it crashing down on the beast's skull. The explosion was cataclysmic. The palace, the battle planet's core, the beast, and Vulkan himself were consumed in a blast of green and gold energy. For 10,000 years after, no sign of the perpetual Primarch was ever seen. Yet the salamanders still believe. They know their gene father will return, for Vulkan is eternal. With the beast dead, the orc forces on Oanor collapsed into chaos. But the Imperial coalition was shattered, too weakened to pursue the fleeing greenskins. The survivors boarded their damaged ships and set course for Terra, their victory bitter and hollow. The last of the Emperor's sons was gone, but his sacrifice had ended the immediate threat. Or so they thought. As the expeditionary fleet limped into the Sol system, a familiar roar echoed across every Vox channel, a deep, guttural war cry that froze the blood of every Imperial soldier. It was the beast's roar. The orc war boss was not dead. The truth was far more terrifying. The greenskin WAAGH. Sweeping the galaxy was not led by one beast, but by 6. Each was an orc primarch of sorts, massive, intelligent, and commanding their own vast hordes. They rampaged across the galaxy, laying waste to worlds and crushing Imperial defenses. The beast wars were far from over.